Okay, so through the power of social media, looks like we're broadcasting live. Technology is great until it's not, so hopefully we won't have any technical glitches. Thanks for joining us. Patrick Queally here with my co-host Declan O'Toole, here for another edition of the Wicked Awesome Report. Declan is from Select Real Estate. And he's actually going to be sharing some information with us today, really more from the landlord and tenant segment of the real estate market, and how that segment of the market is really being impacted by the pandemic. We've talked about buyers and sellers in the past, so I think it's important to talk about landlords and renters and rental property. So thanks for hopping on with us this morning, Declan. We run this every Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. or 10-ish, depending on the technical glitches we got to work through. Let's get started with this morning's call. Declan, tell us what's going on. So the big picture perspective, what do you see happening with landlords and tenants, that segment of the market with the pandemic?
Sure, Patrick. Well, so we've got SelectRE Boston, as we both know, with the real estate side of things. I'm also a managing partner with GB Property Management. I'm not as hands-on as we'd say my partner Shane Hayes is, but I can look at it from, I suppose you look at it from a landlord's perspective. I suppose also looking at it from a property management perspective, and kind of seeing my interactions with landlords, what they're seeing and what I'm seeing as well in terms of how the tenants have been affected, and obviously owners and landlords have been affected by this as well. So I suppose kind of interesting, I've been asked if I've been busier or less busy since the COVID outbreak. Turns out that the management business has actually been busier. That's because a lot of people are staying at home. Again, from a landlord's perspective, or even an association perspective, people are at home, seeing what's not getting done, and landlords are having to be more hands-on with their tenants. What's happened is you've got a sort of a breakdown of two different kind of how society is working and how COVID-19 is affecting people. You've got those that are, we'd say, in the service industry, those that aren't making as much. I think, Patrick, you had a statistic out there. Was it?
Yeah, we were talking before the show. So I saw a statistic that said that of the population that is earning less than $40,000 a year, just over 40% of those people are just completely out of work and just right now have zero income other than whatever the unemployment benefits that they're receiving are. So, I mean, talk about a disproportionate effect. So people on that end of the earnings range have, I don't want to say been totally wiped out, but they're obviously having a much more difficult time currently.
And that's getting reflected in rents as well. You're seeing, so those that are, you've got, for instance, actually those that are, we'd say, the working professionals that are making more than that, and in Boston, of course, you need to make quite a bit more than that in some cases. They're doing fine. A lot of those have, they've got savings. In fact, they historically have paid rent in advance, or there has been an automatic payment from their account.
Yeah, would you think that, a lot of those, generally being classified as white collar jobs, okay? Right. Most of those are probably in a situation where they're falling into the work from home category, whereas the service industry, that's just not possible.
They're at home, but they're not working.
Yeah.
So I suppose the question there is how to deal with them. Obviously, the white collar category, it's everything as it was before in terms of, at least from the rent collections perspective. A lot of it's automated to begin with. We've done it with our landlords, we've done it ourselves, where we've actually reached out, tried to be a little bit proactive with regards to our tenants. We did this early on. We did it in late March or early April, where we, the stuff that you could get from other sources, and I'm sure people are getting them in their inboxes, but basically letting people know that the SBA loans are out there, PPP packages, that people were, if they were 1099 employees themselves, what they could do, where to go. Mm-hmm. But additionally, you had people that were tied into the housing authority to reach out to them. There's a program called the RAF program. I don't have all the details on it, but they help subsidize the tenant's portion of the rent as well. Okay. So that we found that actually that has worked out well. I mean,
that's a great take on it. So as a property owner or a property manager, you're just not knocking on the door at the first of the month to say, hey, where's my check? You're proactively reaching out to those tenants and trying to help them find ways that they can survive. And obviously that's going to help you and your landlord clients, because if they do have some sort of income coming in, they're going to be able to manage paying most, or hopefully all, but at least some of the rent that's due.
Right. Yeah, and that's what we've tried to do, and we've even seen it sort of reflected. I think we have a pretty good handle on it, but we were at 98% of rent collections. So you'd have a cutoff date, say, hold on, your rents are in by a certain time.
Sure.
That took a dip in April, even early May. That went down to as low as 84%. So people were starting to get behind. And we were actually now up to 96%. And that's really, there's a kind of a time lag on that. Whereas everybody, again, I'm not saying this is going to be the case always for us and always for everybody. The tenants we're working with, for instance, so I know a bartender, for instance, that's paying as they get their income, or wherever they source that, they pay it as they're able to. So there's kind of a lag on when the rent gets paid. Right. And again, the housing authorities there's a little bit of a lag again, but they're covering the tenant side of it. So, yeah, I think it's really a case, if you work with your tenants, you should be, not in all cases, but you should be able to get a good portion of it. People are people, they want to pay the rent most of the time. So
what advice would you give to a tenant who, everybody's being impacted right now, but to a tenant that's being impacted to the point where, they don't know if they can cover that rent that month? What, they see it on the horizon. What's the best advice you can give that tenant? What should they do?
What I would do is first off, collect their thoughts, see where they see their income coming or not coming over the next 3 to 6 months. The reason I say that is it's always good to come to somebody with a solution, right? So if they reach out to the landlord and it's like, look, hey, I can only pay half my rent this month, they may even give them a break. I know landlords that are doing that will give a break to their tenants. Reach out to them before you get too far behind. You don't want to be on the wrong side of your landlord. So it's kind of common sense, but if you see that even if you've already stretched, let's put it this way, if you're hiding it now, you won't be able to hide it for too long. It's only going to get worse. So it's better to even get a break now, and maybe agree to pay it, if able, on the back end. At least the landlord will know what they're getting so they can pay their mortgage. Everybody's trying to plan.
Yeah, so it's it's avoiding what I call the ostrich syndrome. You can't just stick your head in the sand and hope the problem's going to go away, because it's not. So it's proactively reaching out, and a landlord as a business person, I'm sure, is certainly going to appreciate having a tenant reach out to them and addressing it, rather than as a landlord having to try to chase down the tenant and try to figure out what the hell is going on. So as a tenant, if you have some sort of a plan you can present, like I said, say, I'm falling behind, I can pay X amount on X date, will you work with me? We're unusual times here. So I think that based on those unusual times, I would like to think that we're going to have more landlords that are more receptive to that type of, alternate arrangement in terms of paying rent.
Well, it's first off, I think it's like location, communicate. Yeah. I think the landlords will have no choice in some cases but to be receptive. If they're giving them the lay of the land, let the landlord know exactly where they stand. They got to plan accordingly so they can make their payments, be it, hopefully not necessarily, because I know you're not a big fan of it, Patrick, but putting off mortgage payments if necessary, or whatever they need to do to keep themselves. But if they know what's coming in, they can plan accordingly.
Yeah, so I guess it's all about, like with anything in any business arrangement, it's setting the proper expectations, so you got to reach out and communicate. So shifting gears a little bit here. So that's really talking about existing tenancy, people that are currently, renting. What about new rentals? Are you actually seeing people that are looking at vacant apartments, looking to make a move right now? Is that happening at all right now?
It's happening. It's slower than it was. It used to be that you put a property on the market, it would take 2 weeks. Now it's more likely, I think it depends on the situation, 45 days to 60 days. And that's not scientific. That's been sort of my observation of it.
Sure.
But it's taking longer, and it depends. You've even got, for instance, Brighton also. There used to be a student season. That hasn't really happened yet because nobody really knows what's going on with those apartments. But by the same token, it's almost the same thing as I said to you before. Like, you look at South Boston, you look at some of the neighborhoods where the rents are a little bit higher, people are still moving because people probably still have jobs, or at least are expecting to go back to work in September or whenever it is that they're expecting to go back to work. So it's the student is a bit of an outlier, but the rest kind of seems to be following an economic trend.
All right. And in terms of showing apartments, I would assume it's similar to showing a home that's for sale. Sort of the social distancing. Are people previewing apartments but by video, or how is that whole process coming together?
Yeah, so on the where you can, you do a 3D video, but where there's, of course, in a lot of cases the tenant's there and it's not the homeowner that's selling it. So what we've tried to do where possible is actually have the tenants themselves take video of their units, so people will see it. Might not be the greatest quality always, but also keep in mind that they're the ones taking the video, so you're not taking pictures of something proprietary or whatever. So they're obviously going to have control of that. Yeah. So the first thing we do is we do videos. Obviously, try to get photographs where possible. In some cases, if it is at all possible, we will get in and take a couple of photographs. But that's highly unusual because, of course, we're trying to respect the whole COVID-19 guidelines.
Yeah.
But that's essentially. When you're dealing with tenants that are looking for a place, it's you first to see the video, that get the description, any photographs you have either historically or recent, and then you basically try to tease them out before you do a tour. At some point, they're going to want to see the apartment. Before they do a tour, you want to make sure that they really want the apartment in the first place.
Yeah, so I guess it's some additional, I don't know if I'd call it pre-screening, but definitely some additional steps before there's any sort of physical contact with the apartment.
Correct. And then there's I'll speak to the pre-screening as well, as applications that come in, and maybe that's a little further down the road, but when an application comes in, they're getting scrutinized a lot more than they were. Is somebody being furloughed, or have they been laid off?
Sure.
You're looking for you may be looking for the last two pay stubs. You want to see last week's pay stub as well, not necessarily something from 2 months ago.
So we talked about tenants that are currently in place and having difficulty paying the rent. I can certainly see it from the landlord's perspective that they don't want to create a new tenancy and right off the bat have someone not being able to pay the rent. So similar to, I guess, a mortgage application, you got to fill out some paperwork and put in your financial qualifications and make sure that landlord's comfortable with you being able to live up to your end of the contract.
Exactly. And then, of course, I think that the next thing is, showing the apartments. Fairly similar to what happens with sales as well, but you have to take a lot of precautions. Essentially, the tenants, we try to make it so that they're not there. We disinfect and wipes, Clorox everything down. Anybody comes to wear gloves, to wear masks, and usually the shoes off, and we'll provide booties if they don't feel like they're going around in their socks or feet.
Sure.
Actually, I wouldn't recommend going in your bare feet anyway. But it's kind of a similar process. But again, it's just those extra precautions, extra steps that you have to take, to show an apartment.
Yeah. And have you seen any differences with some of the condo complexes that you're managing? So, for instance, I would tend to think with more people working from home, they're in that environment, they're looking around and maybe they're noticing maybe some deferred maintenance items, or they're noticing, just because they're there more and they're not at work, they're sort of maybe more tuned into what their immediate surroundings are. Are you getting more calls for repairs or deferred maintenance items in the condo complexes that you're managing?
It's funny. It's not so much. We're lucky that a lot of our maintenance hasn't been. This isn't. I'm not trying to beat my own drum here, but I think a lot of our stuff we tend to be good on the exterior unit. But we do get things like cleaning carpets. Maybe they'll see something on the walls, and those are things that the association is very good about. It's like we will schedule them, but we're not scheduling them now. We're scheduling them for for after. At least we let them know that this is the timeline. Now we've also gotten getting a lot of calls from associations. In fact, we may, as a company, we may double in size by the end of August, just from the amount of people that have noticed that they're not getting the property managed. So,
and why is that? Is it are the condos, so the people that are managing it sort of I guess, afraid to take action in the current environment, or what would you say the cause of that is?
I think it's less to do with the current. Well, it's the current environment is what made the owners take notice. So
Okay.
because they're home, they're watching it, they see it, they see their hallways, they're spending more time inside their units. So if there's deferred maintenance, historically deferred maintenance with a particular company, and you'll get, I don't want to talk about other property management companies, sometimes they just lose touch as they grow bigger. So the eyes drop off the ball and they're noticing this. So therefore they're starting to make the inquiry, say, okay, maybe somebody else should be managing this. And it may well be the current environment too, that they're not communicating to tenants and our owners what they can and can't do in the complex.
Okay.
So, I mean, should have cleaners in and out all the time too. That is
Absolutely. I mean, that should be the norm anyway, but I would tend to think in the current environment, you're stepping that up, times 10. So we talked about some advice for the tenants that are in the property, advice for potential renters that are moving. What about the landlords? What kind of feedback and what help or instruction, sort of that side of the coin? How are you working with your landlord tenants in the current environment?
So in terms of how they handle their tenants?
Yeah, I guess how they're interacting with their tenants. I guess maybe the difficult question, are you finding that there are some landlords that are not being reasonable? And because obviously they have financial responsibilities, they're for the most part counting on that rent to help them make their mortgage payment. So you're seeing landlords, I guess, somewhat in a panic mode in the current environment.
We're lucky enough in terms of the way we're structured. We tend to so we're the ones speaking to the landlord. We have the interaction with the tenant, so we basically take that off the landlord's off their plate, so to speak.
Sure.
So there certainly would be a communication with somebody. For instance, I mentioned that bartender friend, the people that aren't making the money that they used to. You have to explain to the landlord that, hey, look, you're not getting your full rent on the 1st, maybe not the 15th, but by the 20th they'll be at 75% or 100% or wherever it is. Set that expectation. We haven't had much pushback from landlords ourselves. Maybe because, and that might be we got a working relationship and they're like, okay, if that's how it is, that's do the best you can to make sure that I'm not getting hurt.
Right. Yeah, and again, I would hopefully like to think that the landlords are being reasonable, with the current environment that we're in. It's not anybody's fault. It's no fault of the tenants that their place of work has closed down. So
Well, the other part of that, Patrick, is, so let's say, just, be devil's advocate. Say you're a landlord and you've got a tenant and they're not paying, and, it's like, okay, let's get them out. That's not going to happen either.
Yeah, you can't do it right now because the moratorium on evictions. I mean, even in the state of Massachusetts, so not to get on the legal aspect of it, because I'm not an attorney, I don't even play one on Facebook. In Massachusetts, the whole eviction process for a tenant is lengthy, and now with that hold on evictions, it's going to make that an even longer process. So not to force the landlord's hand, but to a certain degree, they really don't have much of a choice other than to try to work it out and come to some sort of middle agreement here where the tenant can pay something.
No, yeah, exactly. I mean, it was out to July. I think it's going to go further. It could be August or September before you'll end up being able to take any kind of an action. And that's just the start of a process for the tenant. As you said, it's a long process after that. So, you'll be sitting down for Christmas dinner before you get your rent or before you get an eviction.
Yeah, and if you start those procedures now, I can just predict, it's just an adversarial relationship. And it's going to make it a hell of a lot tougher to come to some sort of an agreement and try to work it out.
And that's always the way. Even pre or post COVID, it's always been better to work something out with a tenant, even if that tenant you feel like they're taking advantage. Even when you go to court, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit here, but if you can work it out with them, you're better off getting some kind of an arrangement, get them out, and get a better tenant after the fact.
Yeah, rather than going through the lengthy and expensive route of going to court.
Correct.
All right, awesome. So any other advice either for landlords or tenants in sort of this crazy market that we're in?
Not really. I mean, other than, I think essentially it's a case of just be careful. Certainly, as I said, communicate. That works not just for tenants; it works for landlords as well. Stay in touch with your tenants. In terms of, I suppose, we kind of glanced on it. If you're dealing with, as you said, maintenance or something needs to be done at a property, make sure you take all the precautions. Which is masks, gloves, and then have a vacant unit and only send one person in at a time if possible.
Yeah, if you're gonna have work done to your unit, if it is sort of an emergency situation, you want to have the doors open, the lights on, so whoever is coming in really has minimal contact with anything that's inside that unit.
Exactly. But I'd say if I was to give any advice, it's just make sure you can communicate so you can plan accordingly. As long as you're in touch with each other, I think you'll ride it out.
Yeah, and again, I want to circle back on one point that you made, and I think it just goes to your knowledge, experience, and professionalism as a property manager, reaching out to the tenants and giving them options and ideas as to different places they can go to get help, to get support if they are having trouble. So you mentioned a couple of sources. Could you just repeat those again? So if a tenant is having some difficulty right now, what are some of the options? Where can they reach out to try and get some assistance?
I think of course, there's a small business association. There's the PPP. So I'm thinking of those that are even on. If you're working with the housing authority, there's the RAFT. There's a RAFT program, RAFT, and they will help you with that. And then if you have a CPA, it's always a good person to go to for advice on this, because they seem to know everything that's out there.
Yeah. Okay. And so it's reaching out for help, and that includes reaching out to the landlord and come up with a plan. It's not just stick your head in the sand and hope it goes away and you'll catch up whenever. I think we've talked about it here. The landlord should be more receptive to some sort of workout plan. Approach it with a plan. Hey, I can't pay this month, but within 60 days I should be all caught up, or whatever that looks like.
Right. You're better off.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I think we've got some good information for landlords, some good information for tenants on today's edition of the Wicked Awesome Report. So we run this every Tuesday and every Thursday at 10 a.m. or 10-ish, depending on the technical glitches and Facebook and Zoom updates we got to install before we broadcast. So my co-host, Declan O'Toole from Select Real Estate, handling residential and commercial real estate sales, as well as commercial and residential real estate rentals. And you have a partner with the property management end of the business.
That's right.
So is that, did I adequately represent your holdings?
I think so. That's GB Property Management, is the management side of things, yes.
Okay, fantastic. And I'm Patrick Queally from Hancock Mortgage, obviously helping with mortgage financing. So Declan and I have been working together for quite a while, have quite a number of mutual clients, and now we're co-hosts here on the Wicked Awesome Report. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Follow us on Facebook. There is a Facebook page for the Wicked Awesome Report. And please drop some comments. Let us know if there is another topic that you'd like to have us covered. Doesn't all have to be real estate centric, but if there is another small business topic you'd like to have us covered, we'd certainly like to be able to do that. Or if you have a suggestion for a guest to join us that would like to be interviewed, we'd certainly love to have some local small business owners be part of the show. And it just seems to be everything is centered around the pandemic right now. So talking to some of those small business owners and see how they're, surviving and managing through the pandemic.
Actually, that'd be good to talk to somebody. Yeah, even as you said, not necessarily even real estate. Maybe it's a restaurant they're doing.
I'd love to be able to talk to somebody in a completely different field and get their take on what's happening and how their industry is impacted. So if you think you have a good candidate for an interview for us, please get in touch. Let us know. Send a direct message. Drop a comment. But let's wrap it up for now. This has been another edition of the Wicked Awesome Report. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Declan.
Thanks, Patrick.
For joining us here. And until the next edition, hope everybody stays awesome. Take care.
Stay safe.
All right, so let's see if we can end the broadcast.